Hello, Toby. Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed by a noob. I'm very pleased to be able to ask you all these questions and get a feel for what's happening in South Gloucestershire and your role there. Toby Savage, if anyone doesn't know, is leader of South Gloucestershire Council and obviously part of the same West of England bag that Bristol is in. Shall we just kick off and find out what the key challenges are, Toby?
Yes, yeah, happy to.
You're facing within South Gloucestershire in the current climate.
Well, I think yeah, similar to all areas and all organisations, I think we are wanting to support our communities and businesses to take the positive step forwards as we emerge from the COVID pandemic, and I think addressing the varied and unique challenges that each of our communities face, whether they're in the more urban part of South Gloucestershire or in a market town or in our large rural hinterland. And I think that means ensuring that our residents are supported through that we're supporting our high streets and our town centres to recover. And of course, they were already suffering sort of pre-COVID, some of those big structural changes that were happening around online shopping and the like. COVID has simply accelerated a number of those trends, and so putting in sort of renewed focus into how we can support to support them, to ensure that they're the beating, thriving hearts of their communities that we want them to be. Supporting our local children to recover their lost learning during COVID. Schools and education standards are the #1 priority here in South Gloucestershire, but we know that pupils, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, have suffered the most through having so many days of lost learning and perhaps not being able to get as much from online learning as some of their as a lot of their peers. So I think we're putting in place a recovery curriculum, working really closely with our schools and partners to help those children to make up for that lost ground and ultimately make sure that they're in a position to unleash their full potential and so they can thrive in later life. I think as the council overall, we're wanting to ensure value for money for residents, particularly as we're going through the cost of living challenges that we are.
Yes.
And so making sure that every single pound that we are taking from residents through council tax is being efficiently spent on their priorities.
Yeah, which is a challenge for everyone. I'm very interested in the challenges that you face as a leader personally, because these are extraordinary times to be in a role like this, and I imagine that you've had to be a lot more responsive and a lot more on your toes for meeting all of these challenges. What's it been like?
Well, yeah, I think it's been challenging for us all. I think whether we're in leadership positions or not, having to sort of adjust to the events of the past couple of years, and then what seems to be the new normal, coming out of COVID. Certainly when you take up positions, a position like this, you would never in a million years have predicted the sorts of things that you would have to do, and obviously on a personal level, the stress involved with some of the difficult decisions that we were having to grapple with, working and having to share responsibility for those difficult decisions with other leaders, both within the council who lead on particular service areas, but then also working closely with partners, whether that's in the NHS, in business, or in the community and voluntary sector. And then also, again, on that sort of that personal note, I became a dad for the first time just over a year ago. And so Thank you. And so going through, so for my wife to be going through pregnancy, during all of those restrictions,
Yeah.
and us, having to, well, I don't know, sort of, prepare,
Mm,
for what's coming, for what is coming, in a way that in a very different way to how other people would normally have prepared, because of not being able to see people.
much uncertainty, and
Uh,
even more uncertainty.
yes, yeah. But and whilst that was undoubtedly sort of a difficult time, I think also a source of enormous happiness as well, and
Yeah.
something positive to kind of be getting excited about and looking forward to, in the midst of the sort of the day job challenges.
Definitely, and I think becoming a parent also renews your mission in terms of making a difference. I know I've certainly found it that it changed my view of everything, and suddenly the planet has to be a good place to be because our loved ones are on it and they're the most vulnerable part. We have to make life better for them all. So,
Yeah.
thinking more broadly now, because obviously I'm chamber president for Bristol, but there's a wider West of England patch that we all operate within. And as an economic region, we need to work well together. Do you think the three current constituent members of WECA are working well together? Is there common ground? Are there key differences? How's it playing out on a regional level?
So, I think that as councils, we're working together extremely well, which, and it's always important to remember that we do all have different politics.
Yeah.
So we've got a Labour mayor in Bristol, Marvin, a Liberal Democrat leader in Bath and North East Somerset, Kevin, and then myself as the Conservative leader of South Gloucestershire. So, but I think what absolutely unites us all are those common challenges that we're all having to grapple with, and that actually we're only going to be able to achieve them by working together across a sub-region, but also more broadly, across the country, and internationally. So we do work really well to address those issues around the climate emergency, the nature emergency, the skills challenges facing businesses across the region. And then we also work very closely together through the Western Gateway. So,
Yes, of course.
so we have that pan-regional partnership, straddling South Wales and the southwest of England, in order to be able to discuss those issues that are bigger than the west of England.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and again, to come together, to collaborate, and to be a strong voice into Westminster, and also a strong voice into Cardiff Bay, and recognizing that in many ways we're competing internationally and
yes.
globally, and the answer to that is collaboration and cooperation.
Definitely. So we're all hoping very much that with the West of England Combined Authority that we can punch at and above our weight, and really hope that businesses can start to feel confident that we're operating as a region in a really harmonious and beneficial way, as soon as we can. Are there any key wins that we could have as the West of England Combined Authority identity, that would make a real difference?
So I think there is an important role for the combined authority, and of course, which is why we took the decision, as we did some years ago, to create it in the first place. And I was one of the councillors who put my hand up to support the creation of WECA. So I've been involved in it right from the start, and kind of was involved in all of the discussions leading up to its creation. And I think around transport, around skills, infrastructure, and how the climate emergency is a kind of thread that runs through
Yeah.
all of that. I think there are some wins that we can get, and that we have got already in the region. So we have been successful through the CRSTS, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement,
I'm glad
Um,
you explained that.
yeah, you need to be an expert on acronyms if you're in the public sector, so we've been successful through the CRSTS. So we've got
Mm,
half a billion pounds of transport funding for the region, and that is very much around sort of the hard infrastructure.
yeah,
So improving bus travel, rail travel, walking and cycling. And then most recently, again, we've been successful through the BSIP, which is the
another.
bus the bus strategy improvement plan.
Okay,
And that's largely revenue funding that we've then achieved for the region.
yeah,
And that's in partnership with North Somerset, recognising that actually, although North Somerset aren't within the combined authority, um, they are an integral part of the West of England region, and
definitely.
and so where it makes sense to work with them to make sure that we do. So that was a joint bid into government, and that was over £100 million.
That's
Um,
really good, really
uh,
good.
so I think around transport, certainly we've had a number of wins recently, but of course there's more to do, and I think particularly around skills.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now moving into how the different parts do operate very differently. Um, you will know that Bristol's got a referendum coming up to talk about different leadership models, and on the table we've got the committee model, and we've also got the keeping the democratically elected mayor model. Um, I'm not going to draw you into having an opinion on that, but I did want to ask about your own experience of what a committee model was like, as I understand that you, South Gloucestershire, moved away from it a number of years ago. It would be really good to understand how it was working or not working, and just to help others understand what it is like in practice.
Yeah, no, fine, and no, thank you for not drawing me on the Bristol debates. I think that's definitely for Bristol
No,
residents,
I wouldn't.
to be dealing with. But from our own experience in South Gloucestershire, I think it's worth saying that there are in effect three different ways that councils can organise themselves and to make decisions. You've got the executive mayor model, you've got the committee system model, and then you've got the leader and cabinet model. In South Gloucestershire, we operate the leader and cabinet model.
Yeah.
And that means that whilst I have decision-making responsibilities, there are also decision-making responsibilities that are allocated out to a number of cabinet members. So that decision-making is spread across a number of councillors.
Yeah.
And we moved to that system in 2017. So we had operated the committee system for the 5 years leading up to that. And from my own perspective, it was not a happy experience. And I think, speaking very personally, and indeed I think a view shared by a majority of my colleagues in the end, was that we thought that it was an inefficient system and an inefficient way of working and to make decisions. It did lead to a number of service failures. So we began to have a declining recycling rate. We didn't see any new special school or resource base places being provided over those years.
Was that
Um,
down to decision making speed or what? I mean,
I, I just don't think that people were asking the questions about what do we need to be, what are the sort of long-term decisions that we need to be taking today that actually are going to take several years in which to be implemented. And I just don't think there was that thinking going on. I think that genuinely people thought it was being thought about, but not by them, and it was being considered in other parts of the organisation.
I think that's
Um,
called bystander effect in a number of other ways, in that lots of people think that someone else is doing it, so they don't do it, and it kind of
yeah,
you kind of yeah. I I guess I have a particular view on leadership. Forget about what model it is, whether or not it's a council leader or but at some point, someone needs to break an impasse and also set a direction, because unless there is a direction, you do just keep maintaining status quo. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and I do think that having the cabinet and leader model within South Gloucestershire, I think that has served us very well since 2017. I think we have been able to make progress on the big issues that have faced a number of our communities. We were making progress up to COVID, and obviously progress has continued since then, but perhaps it's been slower than we would have liked. And I think ultimately it's about demonstrating to our residents that we as a council are delivering for them and delivering on their priorities that they elected us to do.
Yeah.
And I'm very confident in the records of action that we've been able to achieve.
Do you think if Bristol shifts to a committee model, that it may or may not have any effect on the effectiveness of the West of England region, how we all work together as part of a combined authority? I mean, it's a naive question. We've got 2 other council leader models within the authority, and then I can't imagine what it looks like with a leader that comes from a committee model. Is there an imbalance of power? Is it fine? What is it? What would happen?
Well, it's difficult to know, really. It obviously, that will boil down to a decision for Bristol in terms of how it wants to organise itself and organise its council decision making. I think, though, that whatever system the city council chooses to adopt, they will still nominate an individual to serve on the West of England Combined Authority Committee. So there will be a Bristol voice, because legally there would need to be in order for the committee to function. So, for example, for a number of the decisions on the Combined Authority, there has to be unanimous agreement across all of the constituent members.
Yes.
So we wouldn't be able to do a lot of things if there wasn't a Bristol voice and a Bristol representative at WECA. But I suppose ultimately, it is a bit of a question mark, which will only be answered, as Bristolians, take part in that ongoing debate.
Yeah. All right. So moving on now, in terms of the relationships between the business community and the region and our local authorities. Our city regions have huge challenges to face. What part do you think businesses should be playing in order to be a real force for good, beyond being economic sources of driving the region forward? Public-private partnerships. What's working? What should they be doing? What should we be doing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I absolutely believe that business is a force for good, and can be an even bigger and better force for good. As we work together to achieve the action that we need on a number of the challenges that we've already talked about today. So, for example, around the climate emergency, we're much. I think I can't. I'm trying to think of a saying, which is I can only half remember, so I'm now not going to say it. But we are definitely much stronger and much more effective working together as a system, and recognizing that the public sector, the private sector, the voluntary sector, all of us coming together, is how we can make the bold and radical changes that we need to see.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think, and this has been coming out. I've recently taken on a role with the NHS on how the integrated care boards are supposed to be working, and it is exactly the same thing. In that, if we view ourselves as a service provider, we're never going to make the difference. We have to be a system, and a system that can have we then can have a systems approach to tackling the biggest issues. And I do feel that businesses have a part to play, because unlike the challenges faced by politicians who have to think about re-election every 4 years and the sort of the way in which the democratic process has to work, we have to think about the long term so that we can keep things going in the direction that society needs. Are there examples of good partnerships that you've had within South Gloucestershire that we could pick from?
So there are, and I think that I think a partnership that I am really keen to enhance further, I think, is the relationship between ourselves and the development industry, as we sort of plan out the sort of a blueprint for future growth, not just across South Gloucestershire, but across the wider West of England region. Because the things that we're going to build in the next couple of years will be with us for decades.
Yeah.
And so actually, how we can raise the bar and raise the quality of new developments, how we can improve design, how we can improve environmental sustainability, help to drive us towards our net zero targets, how we can address the affordability of housing. I think there is some really good work that has happened to date, but much more for us to do over the next few years. And so, and that is a partnership that I'm keen to see strengthen. And we've been, I talked earlier about the importance of our high streets and town centres.
Yes.
We as a council have been sort of rethinking our role in this policy area. So we now don't just simply rely on our local planning authority functions. We're also active in land acquisition. So we have acquired land in Kingswood, in Yate, in Thornbury, and that is about the council having a greater role in being able to achieve the aspirations of those individual communities. So unlocking investment within town centres, within high streets, in new community infrastructure, whether that is health and social care. And recognizing that actually the scale of investment that's needed in those communities is going to have to be a combination of public and private investments. And so there does need to be that close working, and so ultimately we are a really effective combined force for good.
Thank you. All right, so given that this is going out to initiative members which cover the whole of the West of England, is there anything you'd like them to take away from our chat to bear in mind in terms of partnership working or anything?
Well, I suppose, firstly, to thank them for everything that they've done, particularly over the last couple of years. I think the strength of partnership working and the speed of that working, I think we've really shown what we can achieve working together as a region, and there are businesses all across the patch that can hold their heads high in how they've worked with partners, including the councils in the patch, to make sure that we're serving our residents and customers as effectively as we can. And I think then is to say that our door in South Gloucestershire is always open for the conversations and the discussions on how we can make this an even better part of the world to live, work, and visit. And I think importantly for South Gloucestershire, I think there's a particularly and relatively new focus on that visitor economy.
Yes.
We've got the prospect of we've already got the Aerospace Bristol, and we've already got an indoor ice rink now at Cribbs Causeway.
Yes.
And then there is the prospect of the new Bristol Zoo on the current Wild Place site, the prospect of the arena at Brabazon. And so actually suddenly within a very relatively small part of the region, we've got a great many flagship visitor attractions, and actually what can we do to really build upon that, and capture the benefit and exploit the opportunities for the region. We're keen in South Gloucestershire. We have always been the economic powerhouse of the west of England, and we're very keen to maintain that position. But we can only do that through partnership working with business and the private sector, and that partnership working only can happen through talking.
Absolutely. Toby Savage, thank you so very much for speaking with me today. We'll look forward to working together much more closely in achieving some of the broader aims in West of England and beyond. We may not bring world peace, but we'll play our part one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaya.